Shri Guru Parampara Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vriti Ki Namachara Shri Ki Pranam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shalaka Radhika Shri Guru Govinda Ki Shri Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Nakti Maya Bodham Ki Shri Nilachatra Puri Dham Ki Purna Bhavan Dham Ki Ganga Maya Jamuna Maya Ki Bhakti Devi Tulsimarani Ki Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Shri Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Shri Prasad Distribution Ki Harinam Prabhu Ki ISKCON Guruvand Ki Vaishnava Seva Vaishnava Sangha Ki Samveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Guru and Shri Gopalika. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, like the wish to take pure devotional service. He followed under his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one could cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. Though he wishes to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth, attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From hence does he bring enemies, and by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual masters, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and master of the devotees. Master, be merciful unto us. Give us daily the lotus feet. Your flame should spread throughout the three worlds. We take shelter at your lotus feet. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Shri Shri Gopinath Mai Pujashi, please make us worthy of your mercy, so that the Scottish Antrim may flourish in numbers of happy devotees, and blessings of Shri Lakshmi Devi, and also love for you and your devotees. Shri Shri Gopinath Mai Pujashi Ki Jai.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. First of all, just read from Prabhupada, Volume 5, Let Me Be Attentive. Although many of the Western devotees experiencing living and travelling in India were afflicted with indigestion, dysentery, and even in some cases culture shock and homesickness, they nevertheless travelled a somewhat bedraggled group from Mayapur to Calcutta to Delhi and finally to Vrindavan. Since the Vrindavan temple and guest house was still mostly a construction site, the devotees had to stay at the nearby Fogel ashram. While Prabhupada again took up residence in his newly constructed rooms near the site of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. The devotees would see him regularly on morning walks and during the morning Bhagavatam class, and he would also come in the evening sometimes to speak under an outdoor pavilion at Fogel ashram. Noticing that not many devotees attended his first evening meeting in his room, Prabhupada inquired and learned that many of them were out visiting Vrindavan's famous old temples and other pilgrimage sites, while others were shopping in the bazaar, and still others were sleeping. Bring them all back, Prabhupada said, annoyed. Coming to pilgrimage means to come where the sadhus are. I am here, so why is everyone going elsewhere? On hearing this, so many devotees came to Prabhupada's room that they could not all fit in. Prabhupada began talking about tapasya, austerity. The tapasis in Vrindavan go naked, he said, even in the cold. They are determined not to take birth again for material life. He described how the living entity, before birth, remains cramped within the womb, a condition much like being tied by the hands and feet and thrown in the ocean. Worms within the mother's body bite the skin of the embryo, and the living entity suffers. Because Maya deludes us into thinking we are happy, Prabhupada explained, we have to again enter the womb of a mother, and although in one lifetime we may be a wealthy human being, in the next lifetime we may be a bug, or a dog, or a hog. So this life is for tapasya, Prabhupada said, but we cannot execute severe penances in this age. So our penance is to try to reform poor, crazy persons. One should take voluntary pains for Krishna. Krishna comes to save the fallen souls, so if you help a little, he will be pleased. Krishna comes himself, he sends his devotee, and he leaves books. And still we are mad for sense enjoyment. Our penance, therefore, is to try to reform the fallen souls. Prabhupada's preaching uplifted his disciples, whose duty was to preach to the citizens of many lands. They had come at Prabhupada's bidding to visit Mayapur and Vrindavan, but their real work was to save the fallen souls of their native countries, and Prabhupada's preaching filled them with determination. So Prabhupada ki jai. I was just reading in the book Swami in a Strange Land by Yogeshwar Prabhu that one time Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master was in Vrindavan, and he travelled to see him. It was one of the first times he'd been to Vrindavan. And there was some arrangement for devotees to go and visit some famous temple, but Srila Prabhupada stayed behind, and because his spiritual master was in the tent, was it the pandal, and although there was only a handful of devotees stayed behind, Prabhupada was one of them. Now he could have went to see the various temples which he'd never seen before, but he said that his spiritual master was preaching about spiritual tourism, that we should just go and do this spiritual tourism thing. And so later on, the next time Prabhupada visited his spiritual master, which was elsewhere, then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati commented to other disciples that I have noted this person, he listens very nicely. So he noted that Srila Prabhupada didn't take the opportunity to go and do spiritual tourism, but he stayed and listened to the sadhu. And Srila Prabhupada was mentioning the same thing here. He's teaching his disciples that I brought you to Vrindavan, but you're just going shopping and you're going spiritual sightseeing and things. But the point of being in the Holy Dham is to hear from the sadhus, to hear from the spiritual masters. Because even the sadhus, they purify places of pilgrimage. We were reading about that some time ago. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Bhagavate
14, entitled The Disappearance of Lord Krishna, text 28 and 29. Kachchit Rajahiko Jivati Kachchit Rajahiko Kachchit Rajahiko Jivati Asat Putro Asya Chanuja Asat Putro Asya Chanuja Ridika Sasito Akruro Ridika Sasito Kruro Jayanta Gada Sarana Jayata Gada Sarana Asate Kushalam Kachchit Asate Kushalam Kachchit Ye Cha Shatrujit Adaya Ye Cha Shatrujit Adaya Kachchit Aste Sukham Ramo Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu Kachchit Rajako Jiva Kachchit Rajako Jivati Asat Putro Shachanuja Hridika Sasito Kruro Jayanta Gadasarana Asate Kushalam Kachit Yecha Shatrujidadaya Kajidaste Sukham Ramo Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu Kachchid Rajako Jivati Asat Putro Shashanuja Ridika Sasito Kruro Jayanta Gadasarana Asate Kushalam Kachit Yecha Satrujidadaya Kachidaste Sukham Ramo Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu. Let's chant.
Kashit Raja Ukojivati Asaputro Syachanuja Vidikas Sasuto Kuro Jayanta Gada Saranaha Asate Kushalam Kashit Yecha Chatrojit Adaya Kashit Aste Sukham Ramo Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu
Kakchid Raja Hukojivati Asatputro Syachanuja Hridika Sasuto Kuro Jayantagada Sarana Asate Kushalam Kakchid Yecha Satrujidadaya Kakchidaste Sukham Ramo Bhagavan Sattvatam Prabhu.
Ladies. Ketchit,
Ketchit,
Weather,
Weather,
Raja,
Raja,
the king,
the king,
Ahuka,
Ahaka,
another name of Ugrasena,
another name of Ugrasena,
Jivati,
Jivati,
still living, Asat, mischievous, Putra, son, Asya, his, Cha, also, Anuja, younger brother, Hridika, Hridika, Sasuta, along with son Kritavarma, Akrura, Akrura, Jayanta, Jayanta, Gada, Gada, Sharana, Sarana, Asati, are they all? Kushalam, and happiness, Kachchit, weather, ye, they, Cha, also, Shatrujit, Shatrujit, Adaya, headed by Kashchit, weather, Asti, are they, Sukham, alright, Rama, Balaram, Balavan, personality of Godhead, Satvatam, of the devotees, Prabhu, protector. Translation, Ugrasena, whose son was mischievous Kamsa, and his younger brother, still living, are Hridika and the son Kritavarma happy, are Akrura, Jayanta, Gada, Sharna and Satyajit all happy. How is Balaram, the personality of Godhead and the protector of devotees? Please repeat, are Ugrasena, whose son was the mischievous Kamsa, and his younger brother still living, are Hridika and his son Kritavarma happy, are Akrura, Jayanta, Gada, Sarana and Satyajit all happy? How is Balaram, the personality of Godhead and the protector of devotees? Purport. Hastinapur, the capital of the Pandavas, was situated somewhere near present New Delhi, and the kingdom of Ugrasena was situated in Mathura. While returning to Delhi from Dwarka, Arjuna must have visited the city of Mathura, and therefore the inquiry about the king of Mathura is valid. Amongst various names of the relatives, the name of Rama or Balaram, the eldest brother of Lord Krishna, is added with the words the personality of Godhead because Lord Balaram is the immediate expansion of Vishnu Tattva as Prakasha Vigraha of Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord, although one without a second, expands himself as many other living beings. The Vishnu Tattva, living beings, are expansions of the Supreme Lord, and all of them are qualitatively and quantitatively equal with the Lord. But expansions of the Jiva Shakti, the category of the ordinary living beings, are not at all equal with the Lord. One who considers the Jiva Shakti and the Vishnu Tattva to be on an equal level is considered a condemned soul of the world. Sri Ram or Balaram is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. Baladev acts as the spiritual master of all devotees, and by his causeless mercy the fallen souls are delivered. Sri Baladev appeared as Sri Nityananda Prabhu during the advent of Lord Chaitanya, and the great Lord Nityananda Prabhu exhibited his causeless mercy by delivering a pair of extremely fallen souls, namely Jagai and Madai. Therefore, it is particularly mentioned herein that Balaram is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. By his divine grace, only one can approach the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, and thus Sri Balaram is the mercy incarnation of the Lord, manifested as the spiritual master, the saviour of the pure devotees. Om Gyanantimarantashya Gyananjanashalakaya Chachurmatamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Makam Kuroti Vatvam Pangamagayate Gurumya Kripa Tamamande Shri Guruvintam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Our Ugrasena, whose son was the mischievous Kamsa, and his younger brother still living, are Hridika and his son Kritavarma happy, are Akrura, Jayanta, Gada, Sharna and Satyajit all happy, How is Balaram the personality of Godhead and the protector of devotees? So this is Maharaj Yudhisthira speaking. So it's interesting that you'd think, why is he asking how is Balaram the personality of Godhead? I think, well, he must be doing okay. It's not that he's a bit down at the moment or something like that. He's in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada explains that there's no difference between Krishna and Balaram except Krishna is blue and Balaram is white. And Krishna's dhoti is yellow and Balaram's dhoti is blue. There's no difference. And Balaram is known as the first expansion of Krishna. So Krishna first of all expands himself as Balaram. And Balaram expands as so many different worshipful paraphernalia for Krishna's pastimes. And he also expands as a Chaturvyuha. Does anybody know who the Chaturvyuha is?
Yes, four expansions into it. Four somethings, four expansions.
4 expansions of Krishna. Do you know who they are? Vasudev, Sankashan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha. So this is known as Chaturvyuha. So this verse that we sing at Mangalarti, Yasya Prasada, Bhagavad Prasado, Yasya Prasada, Nagati Katopi, that by the mercy of the spiritual master, then we make advancement, we get Krishna's mercy, and without that mercy we cannot make an advancement. So therefore Lord Balaram is known as Adi Guru, the original spiritual master. He's also known as Adi Das, not the Adidas company, which makes trainers and things like that, but the original servant. So as Lord Nityananda, his purpose is he takes birth before the Lord and he makes sure everything is in order for the Lord's appearance, and he serves the Lord in the Lord's mission. As Lord Balaram, he does the same with Krishna, as Lakshman. So in this way the Lord appears in his different expansions. In this first expansion, Balaram, he assists the Lord in his pastimes. So, and because the Lord is compassionate upon the fallen conditioned souls, then Lord Balaram, because he's the original servant of Krishna, he's also the personality of Godhead, but he shows everyone how to serve Krishna. So this is Krishna manifesting in such a way as to show us how to serve. Just as Lord Chaitanya, he also incarnated as Chana Avatar, the covered incarnation, not as the Supreme Lord, but he came in the guise of a devotee to show us how to serve Krishna. And Lord Nityananda, he was showing us how to serve the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was personally going door to door with Haridas Thakur, and he was enticing people to chant the holy names. Being that it's the Yuga Dharma, then he wanted everyone to be delivered simply by chanting the holy name. So he was bringing happy tidings to everybody that don't worry about your situation, just chant Hare Krishna and go back to Godhead. It doesn't matter where you've been, who you are, what birth you've taken. In Kali Yuga, no more fear. Just simply chant the holy names. So interesting little pastime. One time Krishna and the cowherd boys were playing hide and seek, and there's one, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember right, his name was Lota Baba. So he was I think he must have been it. So he was counting, and when he came to find everybody, he couldn't find anybody. And what happened was they'd actually all went to take birth in Kali Yuga because Lord Chaitanya was having his pastimes. Krishna descended as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Balaram descended as Nitai. And Narottam Das Thakur, he sings this in one song. Rajendra Nandana Ye Sachi Sutta Hailo Se Balaram Hailo Nitai. So in this song it's mentioned that Rajendra Nandana, Krishna, and Balaram. So Rajendra Nandana became Sachi Sutta, the son of Mother Sachi, and Balaram became Nitai. So in the past times they realised that they had left someone behind. So Lord Nityananda said, "Oh, go and fetch Lord Baba, and tell him that we're here in Kali Yuga on the earth planet and we're having pastimes for the Sasankirtan Yuga." So actually Lord Nityananda himself went, and when he seen Lord Nityananda, because it was Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga everyone is diminutive in size, so in Krishna's time everyone was much bigger. So Lord Nityananda went to him and said, "Come on, Krishna's having pastimes in Kali Yuga." And he said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Balaram." He says, "You're not Balaram. Balaram's big and strong. You're just a little smout." He says, "You're not Balaram." He says, "I'm Balaram." And he says, "Well, I'm the fastest runner apart from Balaram. So we'll have a race, and if you can beat me, then I'll accept that you're Balaram." So they had a race, and Balaram won. He said, "Okay, I accept, but I'm not very happy that you all went away and left me here." So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was known as Dukhi Krishna Das, is that right? Dukhi Krishna Das. So although he is the eternal associate of the Lord, he also had this kind of miserable mood about him because he was in the huff that he'd been left behind. So as the original spiritual master, then it says here, Prabhupada says that Baladev appeared as Nityananda Prabhu during the advent of Lord Chaitanya, and the great Lord Nityananda Prabhu exhibited his causeless mercy by delivering a pair of extremely fallen souls, namely Jagai and Madai. So he particularly wanted to liberate these two because they were the most fallen. So in this verse, Patita Pavana Hetu Tava Avatar, the Lord is descended to show mercy to the fallen conditioned souls. In Kali Yuga, he's showing no distinction. Everybody is available for the mercy. He's considering if you're fallen, then that's your qualification. Previously, there had to be other qualifications, but the only qualification is that you've fallen. So if you think, "I'm too fallen, I can't be saved," then that means that your case is first. Narottam Das Thakur says this song, that I'm so unfortunate, I'm so unhappy, therefore my case is first. So sometimes Maya can trick us into thinking that I'm too fallen to be a devotee. No, I should just give up. No, I'll never make it. I can't get it together. Things like that. So Maya may enter into our mind and make some excuses. But this is not what Lord Nityananda is saying. We're not as fallen as Jagai and Madai, so we're not that important. And we're not so fallen that we cannot be saved. So Lord Balaram, as Nitai, he saved Jagai and Madai to show that nobody is so fallen that cannot be saved. Even Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is saying this, that even if one is the most sinful of all sinners, when we situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, then he is liberated from this material world. So this material world is considered to be like a bad dream, But when we wake up from the dream, then we come back to our normal life. So no matter how bad the dream was, we just simply have to wake up. Therefore Lord Chaitanya is singing Jeev Jago Gaura Chanda Boli Kota Nindar Jamanaya Pisa Chiri Koli. He's singing Wake Up Sleeping Souls. And so this is what Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda were doing. And this is the mood of Balaram, in whatever incarnation he's in, is to serve the mood of the Lord. And particularly in Kali Yuga, the mood of the Lord is to give everybody the holy name, Harinama Eva Kevalam, Kalonas Jiva Gitira Mita. That in the age of Kali, the most certain way of liberation is to chant the holy names. So I just want to speak a little bit from one of Prabhupada's lectures here, read a little from here. So Balaram in the Vedic literature it is said, Nayam Atma Bala Hinena Labhya Nabahuna Shutena. So Bala means strength. Sometimes some rascal philosophers, they take it that Bala means bodily strength. They propagate this philosophy that unless you are bodily stout and strong, you cannot achieve spiritual salvation. You must be very strong and stout and eat meat and fight, and then you'll get next spiritual birth. So Prabhupada calls it rascal philosopher. Apparently in India, to be called a rascal is quite a strong word. It's not like here, sometimes it can be said with affection, oh you little rascal. It's not like that. Rascal means it's very taken literally. That someone is a nonsense. So someone on the bodily concept is thinking that Bala means bodily strength. Prabhupada says this Bala, this strength is different. This is spiritual strength. The difficulty of the present situation is that actually we are moving on account of spiritual strength, but they have no information of the spiritual strength. They are thinking of material strength. That is expressed here that Ahamkari Matahoya Nitai Padapashariya Asatyari Satya Korimani. This is due to Ahamkara Vimudatma Kartaham Itamanyate. Those who are Vimudha, especially rascal, Mudha, rascals, and V means Vishesha, Visheshanam, particularly Ahamkara Vimudatma. The same thing which is spoken in Bhagavad Gita, Narottam Das Thakur says the same thing in plain Bengali language. Ahamkari Matahoya Nitaipada. By the spell of Maya, we are thinking, we are independent, we can do whatever we like. This is called Ahamkara Vimudatma. Under false pretext, false prestige, everyone is thinking that we are independent, we can find out the solution of the problems of life by material adjustment, and so on. So that is our material disease. Bewildered, they do not understand that the real strength is spiritual strength. We see daily that a very young man, very powerful man, very good brain, very good scientist. So where is the strength? The strength is Atma. As soon as the Atma or the soul goes out of the body, so intelligent, so strong and so many things, that is nothing. That is the difference between dead man and a living man. A living man is very powerful, very good position, everything. As soon as he lies down, he's lying down on the floor, he's referring to him as being dead. And you kick him in his face, he will not protest. So where is that strength? The strength is gone. That is spiritual strength. On the spiritual strength, the body moves. Suppose you've got a very good car, Mercedes or Rolls Royce, but when there is no petrol, how will the car move? It is not possible. That is spirit, petrol spirit. Similarly, real strength is spiritual strength. That spiritual strength is Balaram. Bala means strength, therefore we have to take shelter of the lotus feet of Balaram, Guru Tattva. Balaram means Guru Tattva. Balaram represents Guru, Yasha Prasada Bhagavad Prasada. If we want to understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if we want to understand Krishna, then we must take shelter of Balaram. Nayam Atma Bala Hinena Labhya. This Bala Hinena Labhya, this Vedic injunction means without the mercy of Balaram you cannot understand, you cannot realize your spiritual identification. So that Balaram comes as Nityananda Prabhu, Balaram Hoilo Nitai. Therefore Therefore, we must take shelter of Balaram. That is, this song has been sung by Narottam Das Thakur. Nitai Padakamala Koti Chandra Shushitala. If we take shelter in Nityananda Prabhu, then we get peace. Koti Chandra Shushitala, just like in daytime, especially in the summer season, we become very much exasperated, but at night and evening, as soon as there is moonshine, we become very much satisfied. All day's labour and fatigue is immediately moved. So Nitai Padakamala, the shade of Nityananda Prabhu's lotus feet, is Koti Chandra Shushitala, as pleasing as 1 crore of moonshine. One moonshine gives us so much pleasure, so if we want actual peace of mind, if we actually want to be free from this material fatiguement, then we must take the shelter of Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu is the strength, spiritual strength, and without spiritual strength you cannot approach Krishna. Nayam Atma Pravacha, simply by talking nonsense. Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhya. If you are a good speaker, that does not mean you'll understand yourself, nor Medya, neither by good brain. Because you have got very good brain, you'll understand Krishna. No. Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo na Medhaya Nabahuna Shrutena. If you think that you are a very good scholar, university degree holder, then you'll understand. No, this is not possible. So we must have spiritual strength. That source of spiritual strength is Balaram, Krishna's next manifestation. Prakash Vigraha. Krishna is manifesting himself through Balaram, so we have to take shelter of Nityananda Prabhu. The whole world is suffering, but if you want peace, then you take shelter of Nityananda Prabhu. Our real aim of life, how to go back home, back to Godhead and associate with Radha Krishna. Unless you come to Radha Krishna, you cannot get real pleasure. If you want to dance and get pleasure, don't dance independently. Dance with Krishna, then you'll be happy. The dancing is there, but dancing without association with Krishna. Just like here in our temple, we're also eating, but we are eating the remnants of foodstuff left by Krishna. That is real pleasure. It is not that we are stopping eating. We are not stopping eating. We are not dry philosophers. All over the world we are eating Krishna Prasad, and we have got good experience. At least 10,000 devotees, they are taking Krishna Prasad, but we have no anxiety. We have no anxiety. A family consists of a few members. They are full of anxiety how to maintain the family. And we are maintaining a family of 10,000, and we have no anxiety. Just see practically. Because we are under the shelter of Nityananda Prabhu, Balaram, we have no anxiety. That means, material life means anxiety. You cannot avoid anxiety if you lead a material life, then you will be anxious. So, Hinoinitai Binivai, Radha Krishna Payati, Nai, Drida Kori Darunitai Pai. Unless one gets mercy of Lord Nityananda, Lord Balaram, then we cannot enter into a relationship with Radha and Krishna. We can't just go directly to Radha and Krishna, because then we would simply be a disturbance in the pastimes. So Maya doesn't allow that. She doesn't allow us to leave the material world simply to be a disturbance in the spiritual world. And the disturbance is that simply we want to enjoy separately from Krishna. So in the spiritual world, there's nobody enjoys separately from Krishna. That's what the material world is for. And Lord Balaram, he's came to show us that your material enjoyment is nothing in comparison to the bliss we can experience by serving Krishna. And he's come to remind us. Sometimes he's there personally as Balaram or as Lord Nityananda and as the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada says that one cannot preach Krishna consciousness unless one is empowered by Radharani or empowered by Lord Balaram. And both these personalities are showing how to serve Krishna. So we're learning from the spiritual master, who's learning from his spiritual master all the way through back to Lord Balaram, the original spiritual master. And they're showing us unchanged how to serve Krishna. Sometimes the detail may change, but the principle remains the same. So, for example, prasadam is a principle, but the detail as to what the prasadam may be. It's like sometimes we distribute prasadam at many programs and it's vegan. Now, devotees aren't vegan by nature, and vegan is something which has come up over the last few decades. But for thousands of years, the devotees have been practicing Goraksha, cow protection. And there are many devotees of Krishna who have never eaten meat in their life, who have never been part of the slaughter industry, and they practice Goraksha, protection of the cows. So it's not simply that they keep them for their own sense enjoyment, but they keep them to protect them. And out of affection, the cows lovingly give milk. Even cows that don't have calves, there's so many histories that the cows just give milk. Even within ISKCON, we had one farm conference here, and one devotee was telling me that they had saved some cows from the slaughterhouse, and generally the cows were very fearful, but gradually they were beginning to trust the devotees more and more. And when these cows, which were saved from the slaughterhouse, seen that some cows were giving milk, that out of affection and reciprocation they started giving milk even though they had no calves. And there's many examples of this in this one, that this is the dharma of the cows to give milk. So we cannot artificially stop that. So Krishna is known as Gopal, he's the protector of the cows. And Krishna and Balaram, this is their pleasure pastimes. They protect the cows, they take them grazing, and they make sure that nobody harms them. Brahmana Hitayacha. First of all is protection of the cows and then protection of the Brahmanas. So the cows are very dear to Krishna, very dear to Balaram. So we cannot enter into pastimes of Radha and Krishna and become just like in Vrindavan, where so many demons try to disturb the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, or disturb the pastimes of Krishna and Balaram, but they were dealt with in such a way that there was no disturbance. And the devotees of Krishna, when they take shelter of Balaram, they have no fear, just like in Agasura. The big serpent demon was lying with its mouth open, and its tongue was like a highway. And the cowherd boys, they were saying, "Well, what's this? It appears to be a great big demon. And what's that bad smell? It seems to be the smell coming from its intestines." And they're saying, "Let's go and explore." And then they were thinking, "Yes, let's go and explore. And it won't harm us because Krishna saved us. Krishna and Balaram saved us from so many demons. And even if it does devour us, it won't devour Krishna and Balaram." So in this way, they never had any anxiety. They weren't scared for their skin. So Prabhupada's talking about this is real knowledge, is spiritual knowledge, real strength is spiritual strength. Because even the most strong person, like years ago there was this person called Charles Atlas, which is probably a stage name because Atlas is the Greek god of strength or something. He's supposed to be carrying the world on his shoulders. So this chap, Charles Atlas, he was a very famous bodybuilder, and he was selling his program all over the world, and he had a certain type of way of developing big muscles, and the advertisement was, "Don't let people kick sand in your face, stand up for yourself." So people were following this and they were getting muscly. But what he was doing, it was just it was a certain type of thing where it was looking good, but it had no strength. It came to the point where he couldn't even lift his own bodily weight. So similarly, we may appear to be strong physically, but spiritually, even psychologically, sometimes many strong people, physically it is to compensate for the fact that they have some fear. Eating, sleeping, mating and defending. Sometimes Prabhupada says eating, sleeping, mating and fearing. So because we want to protect ourselves, protect our family, and we build up a big strong body, and to some degree maybe we're so powerful we're not afraid of many people in that respect. But when death comes we can't defeat that. I knew one person who was very expert in martial arts. He was, even all the tough guys wouldn't challenge him because although he was actually quite cool, he wasn't going around bragging it, but everybody knew, don't mess with this guy because his particular martial art was Aikido, and he was well known that if you were to try to inflict some pain on him, you'd only be inflicting it upon yourself because he was so expert at this. But what happened is that he got cancer and he couldn't defend himself against that. And he didn't have any spiritual knowledge, spiritual strength. So when we talk about spiritual knowledge, we don't just talk about knowledge we've read in books. That's called jnana, that is the theory. But we talk about spiritual strength, it means putting it into practice. It's all very well knowing the theory, that's fine. We know the theory so that we can learn to put it into practice. So without the practical application, then the realization won't be there. And sometimes because we have affection for the material world, then we are weak. Spiritually we may be weak, and our material desires are very strong. And sometimes there may be some pushing and pulling. Anybody ever experienced that? Experienced that sometimes our senses are very strong, our mind is strong, and it's trying to force us in a direction, and we know this is not good. Theoretically we understand I shouldn't go down this road. So then we actually have to engage in devotional service under direction of the Prana, so that we can be safeguarded from our own conditioning, from our own mind and senses. So this is what the spiritual master does. He comes and he gives us some authorized service, prescribed duties. And this is what Krishna is on about in the Bhagavad Gita. We should perform our prescribed duties, even imperfectly. If it's prescribed, then that means it's authorized and then we're connected. If we do something which is not prescribed, then it doesn't have that connection. So this on days like this, we can pray to Lord Balaram that we please give us spiritual strength, so that we can overcome all the difficulties on the path of self-realization and go back home, back to Godhead. Anyone have any questions? Or comments? So that source of strength is coming from Balaram. We see even in Balaram's pastimes, he has great physical strength also. Just like when he went to Hastinapur and they weren't going to let him enter into the city for some reason, so he decided, okay, then I'll just take the city and throw it into the sea. So he took his plough, it just looked like a little plough, but he was cutting around the whole city and he was ready to throw it into the sea. And the people knew he could do this. So immediately he came out to surrender, and then he was pacified. So Lord Balaram is pacified when the devotees surrender. Same with Yamuna. Then he wanted, when he was in Vrindavan, he wanted the Yamuna to come and serve when he was having pastimes, and she didn't come. So then he threatened, I will just scatter you into 10 little rivulets and the mighty Yamuna will be no more. So as soon as he started to do this, Yamuna personified came and prayed for forgiveness. And she offered him a very pleasing beverage known as Varuni, which the devotees will take prasad, remnants of Varuni offered to Lord Balaram today. So generally devotees don't get intoxicated, but sometimes they drink a little much of this Varuni, and there's a little bit of spiritual intoxication in the mood of Balaram. But don't forget, we're not the supreme enjoyer, so we don't try to enjoy like Balaram. So when we get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, the mercy of Balaram, when we say Nityananda, then Balaram is the same. We can say Balaram, we can say Nityananda, same person, there's no difference. So when we get Lord Nityananda's mercy, sometimes Lord Nityananda is known as Nityananda Ram, Nityananda Balaram. So when we get his mercy, then we can become free from the miseries of this material world and enter into the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And he's very keen to give us this mercy. It's not that we have to become highly qualified. Simply all he's asking is Bhaja Gauranga, Kaha Gauranga, Laha Gauranga Namare, Jai Jana Gauranga Bhaja Se Amara Prana Re. Does anyone know the translation to this?
So worship Gauranga, call out Radha's name,
Take Gauranga.
take Radha, if he become one who does this is my life and so.
That's right. So Bhaja Gauranga, Kaha Gauranga, Laha Gauranga Namare. So one who worships, he instructs everyone, worship Gauranga, call out Gauranga, and take Gauranga, and Jai Jana, Gauranga Bhaja Se Amara Pranare, they become my life and soul, one who does this. So not only is he accommodate, not only does he want to be merciful, but he's so enthusiastic to see that people chant the holy name of Gauranga, that if we do that, then we get his mercy. And we see that practically by doing this, then everybody becomes pacified, everybody becomes satisfied. So Balaram, one of his manifestations, we'll read a little bit later on, is that he's manifests as an Antashesh. Now an Antashesh is a many-headed serpent whom Lord Vishnu lies down on like a couch, like a bed. And he's holding all the universes within his head. It says that the universes in comparison to an Antashesh are so insignificant, it's like a mustard seed on his head. Just like if you had a mustard seed on your head, you'd hardly even know. I mean, can you even weigh a mustard seed? It's tiny and it's hollow. It's got practically no weight to it. You'd probably have to invent some kind of figure for it. And of course, scientifically nowadays they have scales which can measure micro and beyond. But it's so insignificant, if it was on your head you wouldn't even know it's there. So an Antashesh, it's like that too, and he's simply one expansion of Lord Balaram. So he's maintaining all the worlds. So Lord Balaram, he can easily maintain us. We simply have to pray to him that to maintain us in spiritual life, and the other maintenance will follow automatically. It's also mentioned that Lord Nityananda, sometimes he will fulfill the desires of the devotees because he feels so indebted when they preach Lord Chaitanya's message. But if we continue to approach Lord Nityananda to fulfill our desires, then he won't do that because it's not good for the devotee. So just like the spiritual master, sometimes you may, or just like the father or the mother, they may give the child something, but if the child keeps wanting a sweet, then he knows it's not good for them, so he won't give it. But sometimes out of kindness, the Lord will fulfill even our material desires. But if we fix ourselves on fulfilling the mission of the spiritual master, and the mission of Lord Chaitanya, then we will qualify ourselves for the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And in this way we'll get access to that eternal bliss and knowledge And this way we become spiritually strong. ISKCON Guru Govinda Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Kantarashina Bhagavatam Ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki, Tiger Premanande.
Yes, that's right,
Go back to Vinaya Ki.